All right, so this is the first part of this book review for Barack Obama's book, A Promised Land. Today we'll do the preface and chapter one. I'll just kind of go through what I remember and also some of the stuff I highlighted. So the preface is just a couple of pages of just him, Barack, kind of talking through the pages. And right off the bat, it already seems like it's going to be kind of easy to read. It has his charismatic tone. There's going to be some words that I had to Google, and but some of the things that he's talking about are things like, okay, this sounds like something that he knows his audience would be interested in. So one thing that I read, it said it was really quick to point out that um, like he had his upbringing and his presidency, and that was all great. But then right after his presidency, the next administration kind of went straight ahead and tried to undo a lot of the work that his administration did. And then it has some of his reaction. And the thing that I highlighted, it says here, at the heart of this long-running battle is a simple question: do we care to match the reality of America to its ideals? And it goes on to ask, does this stuff apply to everybody, or is it reserved for only for the privileged few? Kind of what he says. And then there's another part. I guess I didn't highlight it, but it did say this. Oh, right here. It says this book is for those young people. Invitation to once again remake the world, and to bring about through hard work, determination, and big dose of imagination for America. So that's kind of the preface. It just kind of welcomes the readers in, and it did me so much to where I continued reading. And so chapter one, it kind of goes through his childhood. It goes a little bit about how his grandparents were in Hawaii, how his mother had him in Indonesia. Talks about how he doesn't know very much about his father, and then just kind of his upbringing through schools and stuff. It talks about how he did not have a political background, but it says kind of how he got into politics, mostly his college influences, and then even when he was out of college, when he first started working in Chicago to kind of start making a difference in the world. He had heard stories about Harold Washington, who I guess was elected the first black mayor of Chicago. And throughout this first chapter, it talks about kind of the juxtapositions he was put in, where he himself, he yearned for a great place, and he'd heard that America was a great place, and he pictured it being a certain way. And even though it wasn't that way, he was like, well, maybe we can make it that way. And he was really set on making America the way it was intended. But he was met with a lot of resistance, and they came in different forms, different ways. And so here's some of the stuff that I highlighted in that one. He talks about how when he was walking from the residence part of the White House to the working part of the White House. He met with the groundskeepers and stuff, and he would see certain paintings, and he said that there's a part where he says the men in the painting and the groundskeepers in the garden, they were guardians, and I would tell myself that I needed to work as hard and take as much care in my job as they did in theirs. So just another reminder that he really acknowledges the working class people, and he knows, he thinks that they take pride in their jobs, and it inspires him to take pride in his job. So there was another part, the part that I highlighted, it kind of goes on to say what his time in the White House was like a little bit, but it says it was in moments like these I would wander at a strange path, and the idea that had brought me to this place. So I guess on his evening walks back into the residential part of the White House, that's when he would reflect on wow, how did I get here? He kind of a pinch myself, am I dreaming type moments, Let's see what else So he talks about how he noticed that there was color barriers, there was racial lines when he was growing up, but he also noticed, it says, I wasn't concerned only with race, it was class as well. He did spend some time growing up in Indonesia, and over there, everyone's kind of almost the same color, not so much, at least more than America. But he said there's different classes of people, and there's a different hierarchy of certain people. And then he said, when he was going to school, he said that there was an unsettling fact that it seemed that The bullies, cheats, and self-promoters seem to be doing quite well, while those considered good and decent people seem to be getting screwed an awful lot. So it's kind of it's true. Like, it's a very direct way to say, like, hey man, how come the guys that don't deserve it are getting all the best treatment? And it kind of turns good people into bad people sometimes because they think that they should be getting the best treatment, you know. Let's see. There was a part where he talks about tinkering around with his grandparents. Like, his mother had went back to Indonesia and he had to stay with his grandparents for a while in Hawaii. But some of the things he was getting himself into, some of the hobbies and stuff, he said there was no system to this, no rhyme or pattern. Not sure what I was going to do with any of it, but he was convinced that it would prove handily once he figured out the nature of his calling. And I think that is inspiring to a lot of us, because some of us do some things that we can't really explain at the time. But then once we happen to find some success later on, we're like, oh, part of my success is because of this seed that was planted way earlier on. And I didn't even know that it was going to lead to this, you know. And unfortunately, like, some failures happen in the same way, where you're like, this kind of went wrong because of this other thing that, you know, this bad influence that affected me, and I'm paying for it now. So there's another thing here. It says, these halting efforts served a purpose. Something approaching a worldview took shape in my mind. So even though he was doing a lot of things that were like had no rhyme or reason, he still had this ambition. He still we're seeing signs that his mind was starting to put pieces together into where he was going to start finding a direction in which he can start going. And so that's what allowed him to continue on the same path, because he was getting signs that was saying, okay, this is kind of working. We are kind of getting somewhere with this. Let's see what else. So he says, next thing I highlighted was, I saw the possibility of practicing the values my mother had taught me. How you could build power not by putting others down, but by lifting them up. This was true democracy, and that's really powerful, because a lot of times people climb their way up the top by stepping on people on their way up and pushing them down. And in a lot of the work that he's talking about, it was like his earlier work wasn't really political, but it was like social movements. And he has some names and some examples here, but he said, wow, so this is what really got him. Before this, he wasn't interested in any kind of politics or anything at all. But when he started seeing these social movements, these organizers of these community organizers that would start building, like fighting for a cause because they would encourage each other, then it was very inspiring to him, and it kind of got him on board a little bit. And then let's see, he said, so while he was doing this, another paradox, right? And another thing where he's like, I know what I want to do, but I'm having a hard time doing it. So he said, I got lost in my head, preoccupied with questions that seem to layer themselves one over the next. I can relate to that a lot, because there's a lot of things that I feel like I do, and I feel enthusiastic and inspired at the time. But then, like, when I really start walking the walk instead of talking the talk, then I'm like, wow, this isn't really all it's cracked up to be, and I wonder if I should continue down this path. You know, everybody hits a little bit of resistance, and they hit kind of some obstacles and some challenges, and it really tests them to see, are they going to quit, or are they going to continue on, or are they going to change their course, or whatever, you know. So he says, so he talks about his journaling. He's always been like, he talks about how kind of he was antisocial for a while, and it kind of, because of that, he found a refuge in reading and writing, and a lot of introverted stuff. And so he said he looks back at his journal entries from time to time, and it's like he was a young man, and he was wanted to be part of something that was grand and idealistic, even though evidence seemed to indicate that it did not exist. And that's really, I think it's very realistic to think that way. It's really realistic to get discouraged when, especially, I remember myself as a younger version of myself, and there's so much I wanted to do, so many things I wanted to like kind of get perfect, but then I started wondering, like, is that just an illusion? Is the stuff I'm looking for really out there? Or do I really have to adjust kind of my tolerance for what I think is success, you know? And then he does mention briefly, he says like there was still the part about being American, the notion that America was the greatest country on earth, that was always a given. And so like through all the things that he was going through, he was always, you know, America first. And especially like in his young adult life, like from college into his early young 20s. So it talks about how there are two Americas. There's the one that everyone kind of hates, and a lot of Americans even say is not great. But then there's a lot of examples of why America is great, and he mentions a lot of them here. I'm going to go just through a few of them. The Wright brothers taking flight, Jackie Robinson stealing home. He talks about like the music scene, you know, Johnny Cash at Folsom State Prison, Chuck Berry and Bob Dylan. He said all these misfits who took the scraps that others overlooked or discarded and made beauty no one had seen before. So it's kind of like the cliche, one man's trash is another man's treasure. He says America really finds the treasure in a lot of things that people think is trash. And so there's some other examples of like things that make America great. He says, you know, Lincoln at Gettysburg. He talks about you know, the Battle of Normandy, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the National Mall. So there's all these things that he said, you know, whenever I'm talking about the America that I want, whenever I'm talking about the America that I'm proud of, it's this America that I'm proud of. Not the America that all these naysayers say is there and also true. He goes, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the America that I see and that I love and that I live for, you know, and that I live in. So I think it's worth, you know, to me, it kind of hit home. He also says, he's like, well, the work that he did in Chicago was small, but like, so he thinks, even though the things he did for Chicago, he says, his like Chicago improved his life more than he improved Chicago's life. And he said, for starters, it got him out of his own head. So he really had to, you know, put his boots in the ground and start listening to people, working with people. And he found that a lot of the work really required a great deal of him in order to get it done. He says, in other words, I grew up and I got my sense of humor back. Like he kind of matured because in college and in the bubble of being a young, ambitious young adult, he thought there's a lot he could do, but when he got to Chicago, he's like, wow, a lot of this is not all that. No wonder it's so hard. No wonder not a lot of work gets done in the way that I think it should get done because it's hard work, you know. And so then he goes into this part where he says, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I had stayed in Chicago, you know, organizing and stuff. But I didn't stay. And he said, and here's where the story gets murkier in my mind. Interesting. So even he, given the path that he's gone from like, you know, just being a regular kid and all the way up into the presidency, even he questions his own path and if it was the right one. And that surprised me a little bit. I thought maybe he's the kind of person that's like, no, well, whatever success I've had, it's because of the path I've gone down, and I don't question anything. But yeah, for this part, he makes it sound like he kind of wonders. It seems like there's a part of his brain that kind of wonders whether or not he should have done something differently. So then he talked about like that Harold Washington, the first black mayor, was one of his inspirations. There's a thing here that it says, Harold Washington, it wasn't so much that what he did as how he made you feel. Like anything was possible. Like the world was yours to remake. So I think a lot of the people that I've talked to, the people that I know of, a lot of the reason, a lot of the Barack Obama fans that I can think of, that's true about them. Like it wasn't so much what he did, but how he made you feel. You know, it probably is what he did too, but he did make people feel a certain way about being inspired and kind of being open-minded to where, wow, this is really possible. You know, the things that didn't used to be possible are possible now. And let's see. So last page of highlights anyway. So it says here, it talks about his time at Harvard. So he left Chicago, all his community work to go to Harvard Law School. And he talks about how, you know, he was inspired in ways that his peers were not. But in some ways he was kind of behind because he was a little older. And some of these guys, it seemed like they had the red carpet into Harvard Law School is what he felt. And he said, but some of those guys, they felt burdened by the workload. Where for him, he said, his days spent in the library felt like a luxury compared to the 3 years of organizing community meetings and knocking on doors in the cold. So, in some ways, like the struggles he had in Chicago really helped accelerate his path to success at Harvard, which is cool, because I'm sure when he was going through the stuff in Chicago and didn't know that he was going to Harvard yet, he probably was like, man, this sucks. Like, I wonder if this is worth it. I wonder if I'm going to get anything out of this, But in hindsight, he did. And then, he said, I couldn't get enough of this stuff. I couldn't help it. It was as if I found myself, And he talked about he says something he tells his daughters is enthusiasm makes up for a host of deficiencies, which is really cool. I think I'm going to start telling my daughters that actually, because there's a lot of things that are going to try to detract them. They're going to think that there's going to be things that are going to try to discourage them from being the kind of people that they want to be or being the kind of people that they can be. And I would say, there's going to be a lot of reasons. There's going to be a lot of opportunities that you feel like might not be available to you, but one thing that you have is your enthusiasm, and if you can ride that pretty far, and sometimes into some areas of success that you might not even realize. So that's kind of it for chapter 1. That chapter was called The Bet. I don't really know why it was called that. I might have missed that one. And then it goes into chapter 2, which I kind of just at a glance I saw was having to do with his wife, Michelle. But, so far, really good read. It's a pretty big, thick book. So it actually just literally heavy as I was reading it. But it was a very nice gift, and I hope to do this some more and hope to get more out of it as much as I have so far. I know it's lengthy. It's a pretty lengthy book, but we'll see what happens.